There's a phrase that can sound almost automatic after you've said it enough times. I got it. Something breaks? You'll deal with it. Someone needs a ride? You'll figure it out. A parent has an appointment, a coworker drops the ball, the family needs someone to organize everything, there's a problem with the house, a bill that needs fixing, paperwork nobody understands. I got it. And for a long time, that can look like nothing but competence. Because usually, you actually do have it. That's what makes this complicated. The problem doesn't begin when a capable person can no longer handle things. Sometimes it begins when they can. Again, and again, and again. Until a useful ability quietly becomes a permanent job description. There's an important difference between saying, I can handle this, and believing, therefore, I should. Those two ideas can feel almost identical. They aren't. And the gap between them explains why some highly self-reliant people can end up carrying far more than anyone around them realizes. Because competence has a strange side effect. It attracts responsibility. Think about what happens in a family, a workplace, even a group of friends when one person is consistently good in a crisis. Who gets the call? The person who answers. Who gets handed the complicated task? The person who knows how to figure things out. Who becomes the backup plan? The person who has proven over and over that they can function without much help. At first, this feels logical. You're good at it. You're faster. You know what needs to happen. Maybe doing it yourself really is easier than explaining it to somebody else. But repeat that pattern long enough and something changes. You're no longer simply the person who can solve the problem. You become the person everyone assumes will. And sometimes the person making that assumption is you. That may be the more important part. Because overload isn't always created by people constantly demanding more from you. Sometimes there is an offer of help, and the response comes out before you've even considered it. No, it's fine. I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. I got it. Not because nobody else is willing. Not necessarily because nobody else is capable. But because taking control has become the shortest path between a problem and relief. You see the loose end, you tie it up. Problem gone. That works extremely well in the short term. And that's exactly why the pattern can last. For years. Every time you step in, you get a small piece of evidence that stepping in was the right decision. The task gets done. The crisis passes. Nobody has to wait. You don't have to depend on someone whose timing, standards, or methods might be different from yours. Efficiency wins. But there's a hidden trade. The more quickly one person takes responsibility, the fewer opportunities there are for responsibility to become shared. Imagine something simple. There's a family gathering coming up. Nobody has made a plan. You could wait. You could ask who wants to handle what. You could tolerate a little uncertainty. Or you could make the reservation, coordinate the time, text everybody, solve the transportation issue, and bring whatever someone forgot. And if you're capable of doing all that in 15 minutes, it can seem ridiculous not to, except now something has happened. The gathering didn't merely get organized. The system learned who organizes the gathering. The same thing happens at work. A project gets messy. You straighten it out. A new employee needs help. You become the person they ask. Something falls between departments. You pick it up because watching it sit there is more frustrating than doing it yourself. Again, each decision makes sense by itself. The problem only becomes visible when you stop looking at the individual tasks and look at the role they've created. You're carrying the things people can see, and you may also be carrying the monitoring, remembering, anticipating, checking whether someone followed through, keeping backup plans, knowing which problem will become urgent next week if nobody handles it today. That's a different kind of weight, and it explains why just ask for help can be such an unsatisfying answer. Because the issue may not simply be the number of tasks. It may be the position you occupy inside the system. If you are the person who notices everything, catches everything, and fixes everything, handing someone one task doesn't necessarily remove the responsibility. You may still be tracking whether it gets done. You may still be preparing to step back in. You may still feel like the final line of defense. That's why someone can technically have help and still feel responsible for everything. And now we get to the uncomfortable part. For a very self-reliant person, doing less isn't always relaxing. Sometimes it feels worse, because accepting help requires things that handling everything yourself does not. You have to ask. You may have to explain what you need. You have to wait. You have to give up some control over how the result looks. You have to risk hearing no. And if someone says yes, you then have to allow them to do it without immediately taking the job back the moment they do it differently. That can be much harder than simply completing the task. This is where self-reliance can become self-reinforcing. Doing it yourself feels safer and faster. Because it feels safer and faster, you do it yourself more often. Because you do it more often, other people become accustomed to you doing it. And because everyone becomes accustomed to it, the next time something needs handling, you have even more evidence for the thought. See, if I don't do it, it probably won't happen. Sometimes that thought is correct. There really are situations where other people are unreliable. There really are responsibilities you cannot casually hand off. And there are times when self-sufficiency is exactly what the moment requires. The point isn't to turn independence into a flaw. It's to notice when an ability has stopped being a tool you choose and become a rule you automatically obey. Because there is another cost to being the person who always has it. Eventually, people may stop seeing the effort required. They see the result. The appointment was handled. The problem was solved. The plans were made. The deadline was saved. Everything looks fine because you made it look fine. And competence can hide strain remarkably well. If you rarely drop the ball, rarely ask, rarely complain, and usually find a way through, the people around you may reasonably conclude that your load is manageable. After all, you appear to be managing it. So one of the strange consequences of becoming extremely reliable is that your reliability can make your limits harder to see, including to yourself. You keep asking the wrong question. Can I do this? And the answer is almost always yes. Of course you can make one more phone call. Of course you can take care of one more errand. Of course you can cover for somebody this time. Of course you can figure out one more problem. That question tells you almost nothing. A more useful question is, should this actually belong to me? That changes the calculation. Because capability and ownership are not the same thing. You can be capable of solving a problem that somebody else needs to learn to solve. You can be capable of preventing a consequence that somebody else may need to experience. You can be capable of organizing something that could remain slightly disorganized until another person steps forward. You can even be capable of doing a task better than the person helping you. None of those facts automatically make the task yours. And this may be where the familiar "I got it" starts becoming expensive. Not when you say it during an emergency. Not when you genuinely prefer doing something yourself. Not when independence makes your life easier. It becomes expensive when there is no longer a real decision. When help is offered and your answer is already no. When somebody could participate but teaching them feels less efficient than replacing them. When other people's discomfort becomes something you immediately solve. When your own exhaustion counts as less important than keeping everything running smoothly. And especially when your identity becomes tied to being the person who does not need anything. Because then, accepting help can feel like more than accepting help. It can feel like becoming a different kind of person. Less competent, less dependable, less in control. But those things don't actually follow. There's no contradiction between being capable and letting someone else carry something. In fact, there may come a point where constantly proving that you can carry everything stops being evidence of strength. The more difficult form of strength may be knowing what is yours, knowing what isn't. Allowing another adult to solve a problem you could have solved faster. Letting someone help before you are desperate enough to deserve the help. And tolerating the temporary inefficiency that sometimes comes with making responsibility genuinely shared. Maybe "I got it" was never the problem. It's a useful sentence. Sometimes it's exactly the sentence the situation needs. The problem is losing access to every other answer. Can you take this one? I need help with that. That's not mine to fix. Let's figure this out together. Or simply, no, I don't have the bandwidth for that. Because the goal isn't to become less capable. It's to stop treating capability like a debt you owe everyone around you. You may still be able to handle it. You just don't have to handle all of it. And maybe that is the real line between self-reliance that serves you and self-reliance that has started asking you to serve it.